The waves were calm that morning, but the tension was anything but. A U.S. Coast Guard cutter had just intercepted a weathered fishing boat drifting a little too close to restricted waters. Officers stood at the railings, their gazes locked on the elderly man calmly manning the helm. Without a word, the captain raised his eyes toward them. One officer shouted for everyone on board to stand down and prepare for inspection. No one expected what happened next. The man simply nodded, and when asked to identify himself, the words that came out of his mouth caused the entire boarding party to freeze. It had started like any other day. The Coast Guard was running routine patrols along a quiet stretch of ocean off the coast of Florida. Radar picked up a small, unmarked vessel, making a slow approach toward a restricted military testing zone. It was an odd sight. The boat didn't look dangerous, just old. Wooden panels worn down by time, paint peeling, and a modest outboard engine sputtering along. Still, protocol dictated they investigate. From a distance, they could see one man on board, steering with a kind of stillness that caught their attention. He wore a U.S. Navy cap, frayed with age, and a look that suggested he wasn't lost. He was right where he meant to be. The Coast Guard hailed the boat by radio, receiving no response. The cutter pulled alongside, and 4 officers prepared to board. One of them, a young lieutenant named Harper, took the lead. As they climbed aboard, Harper noted how calm the man remained. He didn't seem nervous, angry, or even surprised. The officers announced they were going to search the vessel and requested identification. The old man looked up, smiled faintly, and reached into a metal box fixed to the wall. Inside was a leather-bound wallet and a laminated document. Harper took it, opened the ID, and paused. The name wasn't immediately familiar, but something about it seemed off, like a name he should know but couldn't place. "What's your name, sir?" Harper asked, glancing again at the ID. "Captain James R. Maddox," the man said evenly. At that moment, something shifted. One of the junior officers behind Harper blinked and leaned forward. "Wait, Maddox?" he whispered. Harper looked again, then suddenly remembered a story from the academy. Maddox wasn't just any name. It was the name of a legendary Navy commander, one whose missions were so classified most of his record had been redacted. Rumors claimed he had led covert operations, survived impossible odds, and then vanished without a trace over 2 decades ago. The idea that this quiet man could be that same Maddox seemed ridiculous until the captain spoke again. "Yes, that's me." The men stood silent. For a long, tense moment, no one moved. Harper slowly lowered the ID, his eyes never leaving Maddox's face. Behind him, another officer pulled out his phone to check the military archives. Sure enough, James R. Maddox had once commanded a fleet known for counterintelligence missions deep in enemy waters. He was awarded multiple distinguished service medals and reportedly turned down promotions because he preferred the field to a desk. But after a final classified mission, he disappeared, his file closed quietly and labeled MIA. And now, somehow he was standing here on a modest fishing boat, as if no time had passed. Harper's breath caught in his throat. "What do you even say to a man like that?" The commanding officer was called over, and upon hearing the name, his demeanor changed completely. He instructed the team to stand down immediately. The men who just moments ago were prepared to detain the captain now stood awkwardly, unsure whether to salute or apologize. Maddox seemed unfazed. He tucked his ID back into the box and offered them water, which they respectfully declined. "I just came to fish," he said with a faint smile. "Not here to cause trouble." Harper finally spoke. "Sir, we didn't know. We didn't realize." Maddox nodded. "That's all right, son. Most don't." With that, he turned back to the helm, adjusting a dial with the precision of someone who had commanded oceans far more dangerous than this one. The Coast Guard team slowly stepped back onto their cutter. No further questions were asked. No report was filed in detail. The boarding team agreed silently that this wasn't something to be discussed over coffee or entered into public logs. The incident became a kind of whispered legend among them. The boat drifted back into open waters, and the man aboard disappeared into the horizon as silently as he had arrived. Some claimed he was still working in shadows, watching the seas like an old sentinel. Others believed he just wanted peace after a lifetime of service. But one thing was certain: he wasn't an ordinary fisherman, and the regret wasn't about stopping his boat. It was about not recognizing who he was from the start. Sometimes, a name carries a legacy so powerful it can silence an entire crew. In a world of ranks and protocols, there are still a few names that make even the most disciplined men pause. Captain James R. Maddox was one of them. And on that day, the Coast Guard learned that true authority doesn't always come in uniform or demand attention. Sometimes it just nods, confirms a name, and changes everything. So next time you pass a quiet man on a boat, remember, he might not be who he seems. Would you have recognized him?